first stand this morning, Bill Okero, who is a businessman, a politician. We also have Bunyasi Sakwa, who is an economist, also a politician as well. We have Engineer Patrick Obath, who's the chair of KEPSA Foundation, and also we have Professor Gituro Wanaina with us as well, who is a professor at the University of Nairobi School of Business. We're looking at the current selection of some of the faces that we have in the dailies as well this morning that are tapped to be, most of them, all 9 of them will be at the East African Legislative Assembly, that is Yala, and people are drawing questions, of course, on some of the faces that are there. And the most abiding question is of the fact that this is a very instrumental position when it comes to the integration of East Africa and especially the commercial diplomacy that Patrick Obath is talking about. So if someone has the intellectual rigor and intellectual provenance to actually be in that particular legislative assembly, that will be exceedingly beneficial for the country as devoted to someone who has no any, of course, inkling or idea on what really happens as far as commercial aspect of the East African community is concerned. The president has been very pivotal in trying to push this agenda of economic integration here in the region. Also, in light of the biggest picture of the Africa Free Trade Continental area, how does it speak to that larger, bigger picture? Let's continue pace on that particular note. I think we were on Bunyasi Sakwa, and I wanted just to maybe to finalize on this, and that's the question of the Africa Free Continental Trade Area and some of these blocks that are an impediment to the bigger picture. How could we streamline this?
Yeah, first of all, let me just go back. A quick point on the East African community. I agree with my fellow panelists who are saying directly and indirectly that we send these people out without any, we don't have any clear goals, clear focus. So let people get out of the way, go rest out there. And it has been, it's in some periods past, when Kenya has been at loggerheads with its neighbors, and Kenya has been at loggerheads on many occasions, some of the towns officials were essentially to go there and be a stumbling block on this or that because we don't want to go along with Tanzania. We don't like what Uganda is doing, which is quite unfortunate. I think we don't get them to stand above, even the heads of state, stand above and give clear guidance. On the all Africa Continental free trade area, if we have a major push of how to expand exports as a proportion of our GDP, how to get markets out there for our new industries or even existing ones and so on, and we have goals, real goals, then we shall begin to increasingly merge. And we have many institutions, private sector institutions, that are, for example, in the trade area, generally speaking, and exports, that can play a major role in influencing the policy direction of how the state interacts with these outside institutions. Then we might find that we are increasingly then beginning to identify people who can achieve those goals. Because even the head of state would be saying, our performance indicators on intra-Africa trade are not moving. And why is this? And somebody should be able to speak clearly and not mumble before your head of state on that, for example. Perhaps people will be slightly better prepared. But you've seen the scenario we just gone through when they were vetting ministers, cabinet secretaries. I could see clearly that there is a loss of focus. What is it you're looking for in the person you're trying to vet? And finally, you end up by saying, but this person has got papers, this person is a nice person, and so on. That's not what we're supposed to be looking for. We lose that focus. Similarly, as we send people to Yala, for example, and as we engage with the continental-wide bodies, you forget what the key goal is. And you now begin, you're just down, this is also Kenyan, and so on. And this of jobs. If your people are looking for salary, then sometimes the wrong people have some of these jobs. If somebody is going there purely because they should not get a salary, then you probably have the wrong persons that you're going to put forward.
Right. Let's bring it to a close. Gituro Wanaina.
Thank you, Diba. I think the point you are raising is what do we do with the regional economic blocks, correct? they can work together. I think the wisdom and the direction of the AU, of the Africa Continental Free Trade, was can we even looking at COMESA, looking at ECOWAS, all this, how can we come together? And we have more bargaining power when you go to those economic blocks. At the same time, even trading within ourselves and out. And I think as the conversation was going on, you look West Africa is strong in certain areas. East Africa is strong in certain areas. South Africa is strong in certain areas. So I still think they can play that supportive role to this Africa Continental Free Trade area. However, what you take, and I've said this, is people like the President of Ghana. What you take is the people like Kagame. What you take is people like Gaborone. We need that kind of a strong leadership. However...
Did you mention Ghana?
Yes, Nana.
But we have a protest in Ghana right now because of his leadership.
But look at his initiative
everywhere,
a dam per every village, manufacturing per every district.
But it seems the Ghanaians are not really happy with that.
That's cutting across the whole thing. If you look at, and before this midterm election in the US, the guy who won in Colorado, he won the economic, not the will versus whatever, abortion, but he won on economic issues. And what is happening in country, everywhere in the country we're having problems in terms of economic, and that cannot be understood. Now, what are we looking at? We are looking people committed in terms of moving this forward. It's a war. It's a war. Because the moment you now touching EU, you're touching other areas in terms of the flowers my brother was talking about, and you want now to come as a block, that's a fight you have to get. So it requires strong leadership, extremely strong leadership. And somebody say, no. Coffee beans. You're not going to export coffee beans. We are going to export cocoa. Do you understand? Coffee.
Thank you.
We are not going to export beans. We are going to expect economic pillar. Very strong. Adding value to our products.
Value addition. Yes,
If you look at this, the Africa Continent Free Trade Area, I'm trying to pronounce that acronym. It's difficult to pronounce. AFCTA. Yeah. What is it supposed to achieve? And what is our ambition in the long term? I think it's talking about intra-Africa trade. Where are we? 13% of our total trade is within Africa, between ourselves. Look at the EU. Their intra-trade is 60%. 60% of what the trade they do is between themselves. And you look at the American side, it's 40%. Asians are a bit better than us, 30%. When you look at the economies that we admire, where are they seated? They're seated at the heart of those things, of those different blocks. So we have economies in Africa that are ready to shoot up into those kingpins within that trade areas. So if we start talking about AFTA, we need to start developing the trading routes and the trading directions that Africa needs. We shouldn't just talk about the Africa Free Trade Area. We should be actively promoting trading routes. And let me just take one very simple one. We've got roads joining us to Addis, but getting to trade in Addis is almost impossible. Within the East African community, just going by what Bilo said, the number of trucks you find stuck at the borders, that isn't creating trading routes. We are creating barriers to trade. And if the Africa Continent Free Trade Area is to be realized, we have to have systems that completely remove the need to work through borders. We have to clear the borders economically. So, for example, and I'm talking here passionately because of some of the work that we've done in an organization within East Africa. We have cargo tracking. You can track cargo from Mombasa to Kigali. Yet you have to go through the border and get stamps and everything else. You can track a container all the way through. There are also systems that allow you to collect customs in Mombasa. You don't have to do anything at the border. So what you need is a digital framework that allows trade to happen so that you have non-stop borders. You don't need to stop. But once you are a green channel, like Bello has got has got some tea he's taking to, not tea, I mean tea is on the other side, but say he's taking, beef to Kigali from here. Once all the paperwork has been done, that truck should just go straight, it reaches the border, it's got an RFID, that recognizes it and says this truck is clear. And it just goes through. All the way to Kigali without intervention. We need to create systems that allows us to work along these corridors that already exist. Those corridors have got a lot of obstacles to trade.
But it brings to question also on how we cannot be developing at the same pace with the other countries. Because I think when it comes to digitization, we've gone full steam ahead as a country with Kentrade and what you're talking about with the identification radio frequencies as well. Just as we have it with the Nairobi Expressway, that is what you're talking about. You have all the papers digitized, it clicks, the barriers are open. But the question will be, why then, and I think even this visit by President Ramaphosa is very pivotal, because we look at some of the king cog economic in Africa, like the BRICS, and we identify Kenya, South Africa, some of these that are progressive, so that we don't have that lag effect of these laggard nations that they don't want to move on.
So that's what he started today. Those are opportunities for us. Yeah, those countries, let's go for them. Like what you're saying, connectivity.
That's what I'm saying.
That's what I'm saying.
People who are lagging behind.
That is where the AU needs to set its sights on the right thing. And even the EAC that we're talking about needs to set its sights on the right thing. When we talk around a customs federation to come through, it means that the systems are integrated in such a way that there is no need to sort of create customs barriers between one country and the next. And it is the political will to create that integration that is needed. The private sector is ready to do the technology. It's there, it's available, it can be done. You have carnets which have been digitized.
And that's why
when you've got carnets which have been digitized, why can't you do exactly the same thing with the articles of trade that you go across? If, as a union, is the African Union and the EU and the EA, the East African Community, if we were willing to say we will digitize the instruments of trade across East Africa, and then you have a no-stop border, a drive-through border that simply digitally checks you. That investment is not that big, but the return is huge.
But Patrick, and I will take a little over. Why don't we do it? We see it's good. And Kipto, Kipto was in trademark. He knows all this. He was in government.
Chris Kipto?
Yes. Why don't we do it?
But he hasn't been in the right place to
where he is. Where he is now is the right place.
Why don't we do it? We know the benefits.
That's why Yala, the parliament, is very pivotal.
Absolutely.
That's why people were sitting here. They're very pivotal. These are some of the legislations that should be raising in this particular parliament. How now we can synchronize these customs digitally so that it is seamless flowing. And I think this has not been really working well with the previous parliamentarians there. I don't know.
But let me also raise, something probably a bit controversial. And that is where the Huduma number would have worked.
Indeed.
Because now when I go across to the border, I just have my Huduma card because that has got my full record of everything. And I'm allowed to go across the border because within that system, you create algorithms that will allow, Patrick Obath to walk across because he's a good person to walk across that border. And if you can't, then you have to go through that the side thing and go in. Digitization, I think, to conclude, I think for me, if you digitize trade systems and trade whatever and make them work for you, the Africa Free Trade Area is a piece of cake. But when you start putting politics first and putting policy and everything else, trying to create all these instruments and do whatever it is and so forth and so on, which governments are very good at, right? And that slows everything down. That is where we're going to get another 20, 30 years before we get there.
Bilo, that should interest you.
No,
with the Bilo logistics trucks in the border.
Bilo and Wainaina logistics.
Bilo and Wainaina
Logistics.
The issue is not just the digital aspects. I think there are other more important factors that these countries consider. There is generally a high level of mistrust between the countries. And questions of trust are always about, the corruption and lack of integrity in the countries. This is where the issue is really. And I'll give you an example. I export something to Uganda, and KRA guys in Kenya at the border in Malaba will go through all the requirements, check all the documents, I pay everything, anything that's required, I get everything, the bonds cancelled, everything, and it's done. But KRA will never clear you at the end of the day unless you get another document from the Ugandan Revenue Authority on the other side. The KRA office here does not trust its own officers at our border. They tell you, fine, you've been cleared, everything has been done, we've seen all the documents, everything has been, But can you get a document from URA that you have actually been cleared by URA in Uganda? I mean,
That you entered Uganda.
This is a problem all over, I'm telling you. It's frustrating. I mean, why do I have to go to URA, to my customer now who has taken his goods across, to ask him, can you please, for me to get a clearance from KRA? So I think, and all this thing is about the lack of trust in our countries, that because of corruption, because of all these challenges, all these roadblocks have been put to try and make things a bit more difficult. I think that is one of the main issues really that is causing all these delays. You can't trust that this truck is carrying the right goods. You can't trust that those tracking things that have been put are genuine. Within the institutions in the country themselves, there are doubts whether these things have been done properly. So this is the reasons why every country is worried about what is coming into its border. Yeah.
I agree with you. I think the systems that we put in place as Denmark are actually not working efficiently because of that.
Let's assume we are invited in the next meeting in Addis.
Who, the panel?
Maybe ourselves, the four of us. All the heads of state are there.
Yeah.
What are we going to tell them? I agree with you. You have a revenue here. The purpose is the same. Uganda Revenue Authority, its purpose is the same. Kenya Revenue Authority, the purpose is the same. So why having these difficulties? If I sat there as a head of a state, Diba, you're in this team, tell me 3 things, I don't want more than 3, we should do as a continent. And we have already a platform. EU is working. I remember one time going to about 5 European countries. You were not stopped anywhere. You actually don't know whether you have gone to the other country. It's there. But here, it's even if I want to travel to West Africa, I have to go, and it's the whole narrative, go to Europe and whatever. And I think the issue I'm saying here was economic, and it's really very strong. We must bring together economic and political leadership. Let's get a whip. Remove these damn things.
Thank you. Thank you.
I think what I would talk about is what Bilo has said. I would ask the heads of state, right, when they put me in there, say, what do you need in this system that will allow you to release those goods the minute they hit the border to the other side? And you ask the heads of state, what is it that you want in your country to be able to make that thing work?
You remember last week, we added on the point, of physical currency, and you say we don't need it.
Yeah.
This is the kind of thing you're talking about.
Exactly.
I paid my colleague, she's happy,
Yeah.
in MOOPS, Makerere University Business School, and that's why I'm talking. There are people in this country, there are leaders in this country, you leverage on them. Their mind is very clear that we can change the narrative in the continent.
Right. But a very quick one, Debal, without taking people back on this one. I think we are we are being esoteric. We're staying.
We're staying in the stratosphere.
We need to come down to earth.
The problems are quite basic. There was a time in Uganda, if you are traveling from Busia to Kampala, you probably have 100 roadblocks or more, probably more. Then they were removed. Museveni ordered, they were all removed. Now you can leave Busia. The only time you reach a slowdown will be Namgonga as you are entering Mukono, sorry, as you are entering Kampala. The rest of them have been removed. The reason was there was extortion at each one of them. I was talking to somebody just last week about what drivers must do when they reach certain areas of the border areas they are crossing. Each one must have 1,000 shillings just waiting in the hand. And why? I'm not talking about the big truckers from Mombasa. These are just people who are trading in the area. You have 1,000 shillings waiting in your hands, being collected by local, police and other who is who and so on. Let's just say the authority knows this. We allow things of this nature, and you can be there for a week if you don't do what this guy is doing.
But Mheshimiwa, why do you give that 1,000?
No.
Because your car has a problem, or you.
No, let us not get there. First, that's what I'm saying. It's not the heads of state that have to do anything about this. It's our governance systems internally. And if you don't do it, you won't move anywhere. And we know that. Now, if that is the case, why don't we just deal with these nitty-gritty details that smoothen this movement? When I was a young man, we were talking about Mombasa to Lagos. The road system infrastructure was conceived in those days. But what has happened? We have all these little barriers, security issues sometimes, and they're not allowing things to flow.
Societal issues. It probably has not gone out. But if you had a truck that was bringing his containers from Mombasa, he has to pay the driver mileage of 10 to 15,000 shillings every trip.
Yep.
That mileage is not for the driver to entertain himself. He has to pay on the way. All the stations from Marikani, Mazera,
facilitation.
Pay as you go.
Yes,
this is a facilitation fee.
It's not about the condition of your truck. You don't pay, you'll be just waved on. Your car is not going to be waved if you go now to your university.
And this brings to question of what we want to discuss next. You're talking about it's a societal issue, and the societal issues they start from the universities, right? When you talk about ethics and how you're teaching our students as well.
Right.
I want us to just gravitate our discussion on what is on the front page of a Star as well, because I think we know in a crisis there, and this now it's really getting out of hand in terms of why then do we need to reverse, the entry of the university. We're not getting any clear picture on what will be the entry, and they're saying it will be dependent on the government's funding. Right? So if there are fundings, then this is sort of a moving goalpost. Now it won't be C+. It might even drop to C. Depending with the grant or the money. Maybe you can tell us more on what is really happening on this particular front. Should we be broaching such issues right now? And how do we salvage our universities, Professor? We can begin from a particular point. Entry point is very pivotal. Otherwise, then, how will you be making your goals, you as a student? Because this is a shifting goal. You never know if you'll go or will not.
I thought you'd say go for a break and then you pick from there. I'm not controlling this program at all.
But remember last week we had to discuss this already.
Yeah, we did it. It bring a very weighty. And challenge me, in 2 weeks I'll put out an article. I've been this thing for, I can't remember, since the early 90s on this funding. And it's true. The government, and this is my strong, and I get a lot of bashing from my academia colleagues, the government has more responsibility to give basic education because it has more return to society. When you reach at the university, it's more personal. And that's why he comes in, as in the industry, partner. That's why Bill comes in, partner in the university. Because I'm giving people who are going to work in your industry. That model has not worked in this country. I can be in that university and have not brought a grant until I retire. Now, go to the US, where I had the opportunity to, and I thank the taxpayer of this country. If you're in academia, and the third year you have not brought anything, your tenure is under threat. Here, I think in my view, the university, we probably need to change the model. And by the way, what happened to our professor of environment? He doesn't come anymore.
Odete is in the CBC. He's part of the CBC guys.
Oh, he's a part of the CBC.
He's got a 49 people.
So he'd better come and tell us there.
Yes.
He's actually doing the CBC
And so
public participation.
So he's a Kiama, Wainaina, and all that. And let me give an example of Nairobi University, where perhaps I have more experience. Because I've also been involved in the UNES. I've also been involved in terms of the faculty. We have 10 acres, and I'm really sounding like a broken record now. We have 10 acres, Patrick, near Lemur Golf Club.
Lemur Golf Club, yeah.
Nice lake there, there's a golf there. 10 acres. We have a Second World War house there. Why don't we get my brother here, who has the cash, we do a PPP, we do a conference facility.
It's like idle.
Absolutely. Build us there, he bring the capital.
Or even extend the golf course.
No. I'm talking now, my mind goes to Mulimani City, which was a university of Dar
This
es
is part of
Salaam.
the University of Dar es Salaam, yes.
Yes, and now they're meeting. Get Bill, who has the money, do a conference facility for the next 50 years to be relevant. We agree. I don't interfere, learn it, or somebody learns it. But at the end of the month, end of the year, give me my check.
Let me take a slightly radical view, Prof.
Go ahead.
When you look at the management of universities, who is sitting in those management positions?
The professors.
You have a deputy vice chancellor professor. You need, if it's for finance, what you need is a hard-nosed finance person sitting there, not a deputy vice chancellor professor sitting in that place. The management of universities under the Universities Act is wrong. That has to change so that you have people who understand how to run organizations. And they come in and they're competent and they're performance-based and everything. And if they don't perform, they're out. That will then drive the universities to start thinking differently about their business models.
Right.
And the business model of a university that we have now is from 1963. That's the earliest I can sort of put when we had our university starting up, before there was sort of colleges of the East African University or something like that. Yeah. But after that, the structure of management in the universities has hardly changed. It is still exactly the same. All it does is to deliver academia.
No, the worst thing, Patrick, it's even those who become the vice chancellor and deputies, they are actually from the same university.
Exactly. So
Professor Gichaga, Professor Bizi, Professor
Magoha.
They are from there.
So,
and I agree with you. And I was thinking, can we go to the industry? And when you advertise, Patrick can apply. However, we are very arrogant, stupidly arrogant people in the academia. You know, and it goes back to the times of Boyer, when he was the economic, the minister for
planning.
Professor Omide said, I don't know, either Ojane or Omide said, I'm not going to introduce anybody who doesn't have a PhD. And the guest of honor was seated there as Boyer. And we all know how Boyer transformed this economy. So you still can get people who have those qualifications, but they have that managing. Cambridge hired a doctorate guy from New Zealand who was a CEO, but he was also the papers. And I think I agree with you. That management, we need to look at it. And how we deal with it.
Let me challenge a second thing. And I have this one, you can read, you can listen to a lot of the things I've talked about. And I think, Prof, I've said this in your presence. Give me a university in Kenya that has a chair that is funded by a local company or by any company. There isn't any university that has a chair that is funded externally.
A public one.
A public university. There isn't any. And the reason I talk about that chair is that a lot of times an external organization will put funding into a university because the university has created a product that particular organization will want to fund. And the way they fund it is to put a chair, to bring in an academic person who is able to run that program so that they get results. Right? And if you look at global universities, they have chairs from different large corporates who fund those things in the universities. And this link between the universities and the private sector in Kenya is currently zero. What you have is purely the, what you have, these awards that are given to students, right? Those ones are funded by private sector, a lot of them, and by foundations and so forth and so on.
And the libraries.
Yeah, and how many foundations are there in the universities that actually generate money to run the universities? Because that is the other funding that most universities have, is that they have foundations. So foundations, chairs, yeah, research grants, and all these things are the items that fund universities globally. And here, if you look at the universities, very few of them have any of those things. And they need to start changing the models that they're working with and innovate. Also within the digital space, I think the examinations are now being done digitally, but it needs to go much further.
They have gone to physical.
They've gone to physical. Yes. They need to go.
And I've been killed for that.
Let's hear from Bill.
Let's hear from Professor Bill.
But you know why they're going to physical? COVID-19 really brought to
from the other offices called Professor Bill.
Because even most of our professors, some of them, they don't even have email addresses.
Yeah.
They don't even have email addresses.
And
they still have the old notes from the 1963.
No, I don't like this. He's getting ready to bash me now. He's looking at me and saying that people have no email.
I think I want to comment on what Professor said earlier, that our focus as a state should be on basic education or tertiary. I think it's not. I don't share that view. I think the most important thing today, we are in a knowledge economy all over the world. It's and this is where you need to develop more, not just the basic education. And countries all over the world, especially in those developed countries, we keep comparing ourselves to, which we shouldn't, because we are completely different in so many ways. Education universities are almost free. Like in the entire Scandinavia is completely free. And for the others, opportunities are available for them to get funding. And so when you have very brilliant people, you see their results being released in Form 4, and then you find the person can't even get to school, and he has to depend on an MP or someone to come in and say, or a bank, I'm going to sponsor you. I think it's really a shame. We need a situation where the government should, they have already spent nearly 30% of our budgets on education. But we should complete that critical step of funding universities. Number two, universities come under the Ministry of Education. They don't have that independence. They don't have that latitude to do whatever they want. You try to put that land into some use. You ask us to come on a PPP. I can assure you the following morning you'll get a visitor from the PS or the minister or someone, because of that interest by the government. There's no absolute freedom for universities to do whatever they want. Really, it's clear that you're going to get interference. And this is because it's being viewed as a state corporation. It's being viewed as a state entity where the minister, the CS, the PS, and other senior guys in government all look at, you can't just do what you want. So that trust deficiency is still there in our society, in how institutions of government are run. And so I think even if, by the way, you develop all those income-generating projects and generate income, it doesn't mean that universities will make the admission free of charge. They will still want students to pay fees. But I think some of the challenges universities have had is not about these issues of generating income. It's about accountability. There has been misuse of money. We have seen it. How many times have we watched public universities where resources have been stolen in broad daylight? Is the way they are managed. And I think the reasons are because of, what we have just discussed. And so I think for me, universities are critical. And you cannot have a situation where a minister would even make that kind of a mistake, come out in public and say, we are going to stop funding. You are pumping billions into other irrelevant ministries and institutions. I'm telling you, this government is wasting so much money. But when it comes to critical institutions like university,
no, I want to...
And then you say we don't have money.
I want to make something clear here.
Let's hear from Bunyasi before we come to Prof.
There's something I need to clarify after he talks.
Let's hear from Bunyasi Sako.
Thank you very much. I think let's start with the broad question of the role of universities in development in a country and so on. I think governments, developed or not, have put huge resources in getting the university systems to go forward, the tertiary systems to go forward. Like, for example, in the US, where we like to quote, the state, the government, the public sector, pumps a lot of money in public universities and public colleges, from community colleges that are soft on issues of minimum grades and so on, but are very focused on skill development, on being responsive to the needs of the area, for example. They don't have to be national all the time, and then there are national ones. There are some public universities that are as good as Ivy League schools in terms of the quality of education. And you leave the private sector to get funded by itself in its own rules, unless they're teaching something about sabotaging or rather overthrowing your government. You shouldn't be concerned about them. Let them teach Marxism or teach anything they think they want to teach. Let them be free to do that. I think we have had too much interference into this from the state, and they're not dealing with the big critical issue we have now, that we have a split society in which only the well-to-do are able to get their children go through tertiary education. And you can't surrender that responsibility as a government. How do you assist these poor families? I know we make this general statement as anecdotal, but it is actually true in many cases. There are some of the brightest students that we seem to get, at least in the rural settings, qualifying highly for university are from really poor families, really poor families. That's not scientific, but that's what you seem to observe. If they don't get a chance to be supported to go beyond high school that they may have reached with difficulty, what kind of society are we developing? I would not have gone to university if there was no fully supported university facilities in those days. But one more thing, then there is now the tactical question. How you single institutions, University of Nairobi, Kenyatta University, or whichever one it is, how it's going to be able to make ends meet within their own institutions. We know that when we had the parallel system, places like University of Nairobi were awash with money. I interacted with some friends who are dons in the university, and the money they were minting for the institution was huge. But at whose cost was it? The poor student now had great difficulty getting in because of this. We are completely fascinated by this grades thing, C plus or a B plus or A minus and so on. I think we should look broadly, and government must find a viable mechanism with funding of tertiary education, with a social objective in it to support the poor, but who are able to get into this society. Otherwise, into this space. Otherwise, we're going to create a society that is, what do you call it? We are going to restratify society in ways that were not intended. And things will come out only by accident. Like it happens in the subcontinent, as I conclude, in Indian subcontinent. Because some universities teach in English, for example. Indian subcontinent is mostly ex-British colonies, so English is one of the major languages. And others teach entirely in the vernacular. And are able to teach rigorously in the vernacular. But in the public space of employment, it's just those few who have come from English speaking and are eloquent and so on, that are at the top of the mountain. The rest of them are struggling below here. The poor are down here.
Diba here, Mwesmi and Bill, I think we need to clarify three things. And I'll start with you here. Module 2 was, its purpose was to, there was a need. There were people after 5 p.m. they wanted to come to school. And I'll give an example of Ben Wairegi. After this, Ben Wairegi say, after 5 I've finished work. Can I have an opportunity? And that you can't, because people want to do that. Yeah. So that to me provided an opportunity, because after 5 all the classrooms were closed. Now, if you looked at, and it was called 2 envelopes, because you are going beyond data, that was the recognition. Now, where the module 2 had challenges is when the university started taking, initially, to us, faculty, we used to get, I think it was 70%. It came now the university took 70%. You see what I'm talking about? And therefore has that. The second point, the first point you made, I'm a stronger believer in university education. I am a beneficiary. It's a funding model. That's what I'm talking about. The funding model for university, in my view, is that the government can put more resources to basic education. But Patrick and the industry takes that space. And I did present that, I think almost 2000 in Addis to AU. And I told them, and Eritrea was going that way. And Eritrea was saying, we are going to fund the university. No, you can't. It's not sustainable. But the private sector can come in. I'm just doing something, I've just finished doing something, Patrick, with the Engineers Board of Kenya. And that's one of the things you'll find, is the industry driving what is there, even in terms of curriculum, even in terms of support. And I think to me that is a very, very important thing to look at.
Thank you.
And that's what the minister, I think we got the minister wrong. The minister is saying you have more opportunity to make extra to meet the gap. As opposed to a primary kid, the primary school have nowhere they can get extra. And it's something we need to be careful in this country. And I hear you, Mheshimiwa. The issue of the university education, public universities were established to take care of people from families. And they have that responsibility.
All right. You see, just before, you know, Prof, how much is the money we're talking about in all our public universities? It's less than 50, 60 billion shillings. Sure. All of them combined. We are given Parliament, CDF alone, they're asking for 80 billion. They're getting 40-something billion. I mean, it's not about lack of resources in this country. It's misplaced resources.
Misplaced resources.
Why do you give all the public universities and the overdoes? How many are there now? There are so many. And they're just asking for that. And here you're spending how much? That is nothing. That's breakfast for this government. They're spending billions, 50, 60 billion is it's not something that we need to. And this is 250,000 students.
Yeah.
That's money you're going to spend on 250,000. So I mean, it's not lack of resources. So when someone goes out there and says, universities should look for money, and every day, universities, the issue is about funding.
Let me ask a question, Prof, as you're on this subject. Are universities, if I spend money in the university, is it tax-free?
No, you, as in the private sector.
Yes.
No, there's no recognition of
little things like that.
Yes.
If you start making them, if you're putting money into universities as a private sector, as a foundation, as whatever it is,
expense,
right? It becomes an expense that you can actually take off against tax, right? And there are little things like that which will encourage, right? So people to actually invest.
Yeah? So are you talking about?
We just need to relook at. I mean, the CUE needs to examine itself and look at the statutes that it's supposed to operate under, and see whether those are the ones that are restricting universities from being creative. Yeah, because the universities are in a straitjacket by law. We still have the universities that must have a library, they must have this, they must have, there are certain things, cities must have a cathedral, must have this, must have a public library and all the rest of it, yeah?
Even the small things like budget of a library must be a percentage of, everything is determined.
So it is, there's this whole bunch of things that I think are completely a cake in terms of defining the way university can operate. We need to take all that off and look at what is the purpose of a university. What is it supposed to deliver? And then give it the mechanisms to deliver. Not put the constraints on the name rather than looking at what it is supposed to deliver.
Right. Okay.
Right? And I think there's a happy medium between them that can unleash the opportunities for universities to think innovatively about funding. But at the moment, the statutes that control them are ridiculous.
So
I don't know, Prof. I mean, I'm looking as an outsider.
Yes,
but I've sat on a few councils of universities and just seen the shackles that you have when you're trying to do anything.
But I believe in the keeping a teach. Once upon a time, keeping a teach said that you can break the law for good reasons. Julius. Why has Dar es Salaam gone a PPP and has worked? Why should I have an idle 10 acres, 50 acres in Kilimani? And the PPP now, the PPP revised 2021 is very progressive. Those are things we can leverage. I think the bottom line, also, and that's...
But what holds us from actually amending some of these statutes from the legislators?
Don't appoint people on the basis of how many PhDs they have got to lead these institutions.
This way I will never be a vice chancellor. Of course, the age doesn't allow. But,
yes, but it was the same in hospitals, that the head of a hospital had to be a doctor.
Yeah.
They had no notion of how to run that institution.
Serious problem.
And the same thing with universities, but not entirely. There will be a mix. But you must also have people there, critical people, who know then how to leverage.
Look at the Kenyatta Hospital. The chair is Nana Bedik, our lady, the one who was the VC at Kenyatta. Yeah. And it works. It's working. But now they have their own politics now.
There are issues there. Even as we take a short break right now, briefly, we talk about this funding and also our students and the bursary as well. But how then do we retain when we have some of these talented students, the S students, and we take them
from poor families?
Yes. Because I was forwarded this particular article by one of professor here way back, by Collins Mabinda, and he actually did a research on where Kenya's best and brightest high school brains who've gone also to universities end up, and here is what he found. It says in 1989 we had KCSE Naam Samnake from Alliance High School, top student in 1989. He's now a pediatric surgeon in Australia. In 1919 we had David Were, KCSE again, from Starehe. He's now an engineer in America. In 1991, we had Humphrey Wetanga, Alliance High School. He went to Harvard and is now a leading insurance company. He's leading an insurance company in South Africa. In 1992, David Tengeta from Mangu High School. He's now an engineer in America. 1993, Kinairu Wasiru, Alliance High School. He went to Harvard and is now working in Wall Street. In 1994, Kiremania Muridi from Alliance High School. He went to Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, now a computer engineer in America. In 1995, we had James Mwangi, Alliance High School, not our James Mwangi, went to Harvard, now a management consultant in South Africa. 1997, Mashuma Nyata, Alliance High School, went to Harvard, now works for SoftBank at Latin America as head of startups. We have 1998, Timothy Thairu, Alliance High School, went to Harvard, now a computer engineer in America. In 1999, Samuel Gikandi, Alliance High School, went to MIT, worked for Morgan Stanley in Hong Kong, before co-founding Africa's Talking, a board member, should say, of Stanbic Bank. We had 2000, and it goes on and on, huh? Actually. I'm almost there, but you're getting the idea. We have Samuel Gikandi, Alliance High School, went to MIT. I've mentioned that. 2000, Dar Tishampati went to Adelaide University in Australia. He is from Mangu High School, now defense systems engineer in Australia. James Kandie Rotich went to Kabarak High School, enrolled at MIT, and now is an engineer at Google. Now you understand, he says, why things don't move in Kenya. Our best fled were given full scholarships to universities abroad. The top girls in 2019, Marianne Jerry Baraza, said she wants to go to Harvard, study medicine, and live in Boston, USA. No Kenya in her future plans, she said. She made good her plans. She's now a biomedical engineer student at Dartmouth College, an Ivy League college, and may well apply to Harvard Medical School since medicine in America is postgraduate professional course. But can you blame her, really? In a country where semi-illiterate politicians, thieves, are billionaires, and PhD holders are broke and tamaki.
You know, I saw that article, Dibal.
You saw
it? I read that it was on social media, but I think the gentleman was very selective, because you have each year 500,000 students are getting into living schools and getting into universities, and there are very many who are top, and many of them have gone to all those universities and come back. We have thousands of Harvard and other MIT graduates.
Equity.
No, there are so many. So he's not mentioning the number that is coming. That is retained out there is not even 1%. 19% of them will just come back after they graduate from those institutions, of higher learning in those countries. So I think it's not true to say that we have, everyone who is an A student is just disappearing.
By the way, that is also good. That is also good. And EBK are doing that. They have this Washington Accord. So those federates that develop, they can actually still do that technology. Boeing, they have manufacturing in Singapore. There are some contracting guys from Africa. So it's good when they're there.
And you can't get jobs here anyway, all the time.
But he's right.
India is benefiting on this heavily. You know, their diaspora.
But you see, that's
brains are really part of the engine of growth.
What I teach is that's when you
no, not just remittances. Yeah. The enterprises, they lead and create and link up with home, has made India, has put India very competitively on the map.
That's when you write with statistics. That's what I think,
but Dibal, I think just to add on to this, and I think that person who did that had a very myopic view on that thing. The resurgence of China is due to the same people that we're talking about who went, learned, stayed, got to know, and then came back. China's space program is being done by people who are in NASA, Chinese, who went to those Ivy League universities, and then went to NASA, to Boeing, to Dassault, and all those people who are in that space. They worked there for 10, 15, 20 years, and they're now back heading the research and whatever it is, the industries in China that are growing the same thing. China is making its planes now. Yeah, they're making aeroplanes. And those people who are doing that actually worked in the US for 20 years or so. And they're back now having fully matured to do the economy. So even as we look at the total number that go out on scholarships, as Bilo said, the number that come back into this country and continue working anyway and doing things, right? You look at a lot of the captains of industry now in this country. If you look at their CVs, a lot of them went to those organizations outside, and they're back in this country making a difference. Look at some of the startups that are actually quite successful in this country. Look at who started them up. A lot of them are people who have had that external exposure and come back into this country, and they're able to apply what they learned out there back here. Although they spent time there, yes, you need to spend time there, it will work. And look at, and you also look at the, what I call the brain drain gain equation, where you actually purpose to send your people out. And they go out, they learn, they earn, and they come back. And that earn, which is what these people are talking about, that they're working in that place, they gain that valuable experience that a lot of our students here are saying, where can I get that experience? Because there's no internships and everything else and so forth. Those people who go out there, they actually get that. So by the time they come back, they're actually fully matured. And they're able to really get into the economy and begin to make things work. So let's not look at it as a negative. I think it's an opportunity that we need to apply not just at the university level, but all the way down. We made a very big faltering start in terms of exporting nurses to the UK. I think there was and into Europe and so forth and so on, where we couldn't get the system right as a country. But look at Philippines. Philippines has got that act perfect. If you go on the cruise ships in this world, you'll find that almost 70 or 80% of them have got Filipino entertainers. Because they purposed to export people at that level, musicians, out as entertainers into the world. And they train them and they go out and they're good at that. You look at the Middle East, you look at a lot of America, South America, a lot of the nurses and people like that come from that country. So they purposed to train people, send them out, they gain experience, and then they come back to the country. They wouldn't have gained that experience if they stayed in that country and were hoping that the country would grow.
College is a very good example.
Another one.
Yeah. Right. We do for a station break. When we circle back, I think we've exhausted and beaten to the ground that topic of state university.
If I became a vice chancellor, what would I do?
Oh, well, another day.
Today.
That will be part two.
Part two.
We want to take a short break right now. When we circle back, I want you to just also take a look at the Business Daily as well. Yesterday was a big day in Parliament, and some of the exceedingly beneficial aspects of Nairobi Expressway is on the land prices right now. That is bound to soar 20%. Or it has soared right now. Land prices soar 20% on Nairobi Expressway effect. And investors in Syokimau, Kitengela, and Athi River registered